I am Dr. Vinita Bhadoria, Associate Professor of English, Government College, Behror. Today, in this video, I am going to explain London, the poem written by William Blake. This poem, London, reveals the feelings of William Blake towards the society that he lived in. To endure 19th centuries England was to know the most restrictive of societies where laws were broken only on penalty of death and people followed a specific societal protocol. It is still universal and timeless as every society has restrictions which it has placed on human lives. The poet makes it very clear that he believes the government to have too much control and society to be too stringent. The poem is consisted with 4 stanzas. Each stanza contains 4 lines, and now I explain you stanza wise the whole poem. First stanza: I wander through each chartered street, near where the chartered teamsters flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. Few meanings. Chartered means narrow, and later the word chartered is changed with the word dirty. So I think congested also fitted to this word. Literal meaning of chartered is hired, implying bribery or slavery. Thames. Thames is the name of the river who flows in London, and the city of London is situated on the banks of River Thames. Weaknesses. Woes are the difficulties, worries. Infants are the newborn kids. Cry of fear. Simple. So, in the first stanza, marks of woe. Woe is some difficulties, some pains, some miseries. In the first stanza, the poet provides setting and tone. The setting can, of course, be derived from the little, but the first stanza also reveals that the poet is walking down a street. He says that he wanders, roaming without any aim. He says that he wanders, he is roaming down each chartered street, every street, whether it is narrow or congested. The term wander gives some insight into the speaker as well. He appears to be not quite sure of himself and a bit misguided, if not entirely lost. The use of the term chartered also suggests that the streets he walks are controlled and rigid, that is, congested. He is not walking in a free open field, but a confined, rigid, mapped out area. The poet will expound upon the idea later on in London. As he walks, he notices something about the faces of the people. He is talking about the faces of the people in these lines, and marks in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. So, in every face, he sees something. There seems to be the marks of weariness, tiredness, pain in them all. He describes their faces as having weaknesses and worries. This setup of the tone as melancholy, sad. The tone of the poetry is sad, melancholic. The gloom and the sadness seems to seep from the poet's voice as he describes the passers-by. This is the idea poet wants to convey symbolically, and the literal meaning of these lines are: the poet is roaming in the streets of London. He sees the people who live there. He also visits the people and streets besides the river Thames. He finds the people in miserable condition. Mark in every face I meet. He sees their pale and withered faces. There are signs of sorrows on every face. Their features betray their sufferings and painful condition. They reveal their weak condition, their weakness. The poet says that each street in London is charted, clearly defined, and like the charted Thames, limited and confined by its definition. Every face in London is again charted, is full of pain, miseries, marked by the same lack of scope and the same misery and the woes, difficulties because of it. Poet says that this quality of chartedness is not due to the social conditions but because of social injustice. Everywhere the poet hears cries of pains and sufferings. On analyzing next four lines, stanza 2. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every vein, the mind forced manacles I hear. Cry of fear. Men are afraid. Ben, addict, proclaimed. Mind forced manacles. He is using an image. Mind forced manacle. He was convinced that repression in all its forms was man made and that it comes from man's mind, not his body or spirit. Forget. In the first stanza, poet shows the setting and tone of London. In the second stanza, he gives some insight into the speaker's melancholy feelings towards the people he watches pass him by. The speaker reveals that from the cry of newborn infant to the cry of full grown man, everybody, from child to adult, he hears the mind forced manacles, totally bond mind. This gives insight into his despairing view of mankind. The manacles are shackles or some kind of chain that keeps a person imprisoned. The fact that these chains are mind forced reveals that they are metaphorical chains created by the people's own ideas. All are afraid completely, all are in miserable condition. The use of the word ban reveals that these manacles are placed there by society. A ban, of course, is a restriction given by law. The poet use of words such as chartered, ban, and manacles reveal his belief that society metaphorically imprisons people. Suddenly it becomes apparent that the thoughts, pressures, and ideals of society are under security here. No individual is free Poet says that this charted quality is not due to the social conditions but because of social injustice. They are bonded totally by the laws. Everywhere the poet hears cries of pains and sufferings. On analyzing the cause of all these sufferings and pains, he finds that it is all due to the society. Black finds that the sufferings are caused by repression. He was convinced that repression in all its forms was man made and that it comes from man's mind only. I have written mind force miracle is in bold words. Why? Because it has interpreted the words in another way. Men are new imprisoned in the chains they have forced for themselves. They themselves forced chains upon them. It was they who invented the society which now oppresses them. Now the next stanza. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appels, and the hapless soldiers sigh, runs in blood down palaces' walls. Hapless. Hapless is unlucky, unfortunate, and also hopeless. Midnight streets, street at midnight time. Youthful harlot. Harlot are the prostitutes. Curse. Curse is, in Hindi we can say it sharp. Blast, to blow up. Blights, destroy karna. In this stanza, the poet digs even deeper into the reason for his feelings toward humanity. He implies that the shackles worn by the people and inflicted by society have some disastrous results. He begins with the chimney sweeper. The chimney sweeper was one of the poorest of society. His life expectancy was threatened because of his line of work. He was consistently dirty and sick. Those of the lowest class were forced into this kind of work in order to provide for their families. Then the speaker criticizes the church, calling it blackening and claiming that even the church appels at the chimney sweeper. Often the chimney sweepers were just children. They were small enough to fit down the chimneys. These children were often orphaned children, and the church was responsible for them. This explains why the poet ties the chimney sweepers with the blackening church. After that, he speaks out about the hapless soldiers. His attention goes to the hopeless soldiers, unfortunate soldiers. He has already criticized society, pointed out the misfortunes of the poor and the hypocrisy of the church, and now he will also criticize the government by suggesting that the soldiers are poor victims of corrupt government. He reveals his feelings towards war and describing the blood that runs down the palace walls, the soldiers. The palace, of course, is where royalty would have lived. Thus, the poet accuses the higher up people in his society of spilling the blood of the soldiers in order to keep their comfort of living in a palace. In other words, we can explain these lines like the poet is roaming in the city of London and sees various persons belonging to different occupations. He sees chimney sweepers, soldiers. He finds them all in miserable condition. They are victims of a system based not on brotherhood but on fear. Each in his own way shows up the shows on which high society thrives. The poet hears the cry of chimney sweepers. He sees the blackening church and imagines that the churches are turning pale with shame or pity. This is metaphor. The word apples is very suggestive. The poet hears the sighs of the unlucky soldiers who has lost all hopes of his life. He has been punished by the court. But most through midnight streets I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear and blights with plagues of the marriage years. Infant is newborn child, harlot is prostitute, blight is destroys. This is the last and final stanza of the poem. In this, the poet reveals how the corruptness of society attacks innocence. He says that he hears the youthful prostitute's curse. The idea of a youthful prostitute suggests the level of poverty and corruption, that a girl who was yet a youth would be involved in prostitution. Then things become even more interesting as the poet reveals the object of the prostitute's cursing. She curses at the tears of a newborn baby. This is the ultimate attack upon innocence. The speaker does not reveal whether the prostitute is the mother of the baby or not, but he does imply that rather than comforting a crying infant, she curses it. This reveals the hardened heart of the harlot, that means prostitute, which represents the hardened heart of society at large, while the innocent sheds tears, the perverted attack them. The last line of London reveals, and blights with plagues of marriage hears. Thoughts on marriage as well. The prostitute apparently has blighted, destroys the marriage years. Marriage, institution of marriage. She has deranged marriage by having sold her body before ever entering into the marriage union. Although the speaker believes that the prostitute has somehow damaged marriage, he also reveals his beliefs about marriage in the first place. The fact that he calls it a marriage here reveals that he views marriage as death, destruction of marriage. Overall, the poem has criticized society, the church, prostitution, and even marriage. The innocent baby shedding tears represents those who are innocent in the world. They are few and they are scoffed at. They are also infants and are not left to be innocent in the world. They are few and they are scoffed at. They are infants and are not left to be innocent for long. Their innocence is blasted by the cry of the perverted. In other words, when the poet walks in the streets of London at midnight times, he hears the call of prostitutes. They have not adopted this profession willingly. It is forced on them by the marriage laws of the British society. The prostitute gives birth to a child who will be a burden on society. It being an illegitimate child will have no future in the world. The prostitute's curses call down a plague on conjugal love because the husband has contracted venereal disease by his contact with the prostitute. A loveless marriage is no better than a dead body, according to the poet. According to the poet, in the whole poem, everything, every destroy is only because of social laws. So, social laws are completely responsible for the degeneration of individuals and evils of society because they are based on social injustice. This is all in this video. Hope you all understand the poem well. Thank you very much.